But he wrote initially like, "Oh man, they're overwhelming the Iranian air defense. They're taking them out. The nuclear site." It was just like, okay. And then I wrote back, "Well, not really." And oh boy, he attacked and attacked. Well, 8 hours later, he's singing a different tune. He's going, "Well, see, this was a limited strike. Israel didn't really want to put everything at risk." You guys just recognize, from the standpoint of Israel, anybody that's they're objectively thinking about it, they should have reached this conclusion. Iran has the capability to penetrate and defeat Israeli air defense systems. Israel does not, I repeat, does not have the capability to penetrate and defeat Iranian air defense systems, in part because you got the Russians helping the Iranians. And the systems proved not pretty effective, very effective. And we know this just by judging the reaction so far of the government of Iran, and just actually sort of Iranian social media. There's no sort of demand for revenge, demand for response, that, what happens when you get punched in the nose and it hurts. They're more like I got this itchy little mosquito bite on my arm, but it's, it was an annoyance, but it wasn't anything, it was no big deal. So we're looking at Israel trying to cope with the realization that it's no longer the mightiest military power in the Middle East. Your sound's off, Nima.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
And they're talking about their fighter jets invading the airspace of Iran. Do we have any?
No, they didn't. They never did. They never got in there. I mean, they just didn't. If they had, it would have been shot down. So,
it seems that, Larry, Israel doesn't have capabilities to send missiles from Israel to Iran. They have to carry them by fighter jets, then shoot it at Iran.
No, I think that they've got some ballistic missile capability that can be ground launched. They chose not to use it for whatever reason. I don't know if it's that there's a limited supply, or in their judgment that those missiles would not necessarily be accurate as to what they use by launching from the air. But, again, they tried to say, "Oh, this was a limited strike." It was 100 friggin' aircraft, for the love of God. Really? Limited? It wasn't limited. And if each one of those planes carried, two air-launched missiles, that's a 200 missile barrage. Some are saying that Israel ended up launching close to 600 missiles. So we don't know what the real number is. All we know is that Iran had vowed that if it had been attacked, it was going to retaliate. They haven't retaliated. Not because they were so damaged and so hurt, but because they prevailed. And they prevailed, I think, with the assistance of the Russians, who played a very critical role. Because it's part of it's in Russia's interest to make sure that this thing does not escalate any further than it is at present. To try to keep it contained. And, candidly, I suspect Russian intelligence analysts, and maybe some of the Iranian intelligence analysts, are starting to judge that Israel is now in a war of attrition that it cannot win. And by the losses it's suffering, not just in terms of casualties on the battlefield and equipment, but economically, and population that's fleeing, what happens to Israel over the next 6 to 12 months isn't a pretty picture, because clearly Hezbollah can sustain and intensify the fight beyond what it already has, and Israel Israel's already suffering the pain of trying to go into southern Lebanon. So the last thing they need is to expand the war and they can't even fight a one-front war. They can't defeat Hamas in Palestine so far in the Gaza Strip. But now that they're in trading blows with Hezbollah, and then active in the West Bank, and then with the Houthis still retaining their capability to attack, and now trying to expand the war to Iran, Israel's overreached.
If we consider the conflict between Iran and Israel as a conflict of establishing deterrence, who was capable of achieving that?
Oh, I think Iran was. The typical, and I run across this in some of the comments, like to the when Andre and I were with you as the attack was underway, and commenting on it. Some of the comments from some of the more ardent Zionists who come to the side to say, "Oh, you're all wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." They grab hold of a belief about Israeli military superiority in all things, and you can show them any amount of facts, and it won't shake them off of those facts. They just continue to insist, "Oh no, we're right." Okay, but the reality, what happened, early Saturday morning in Iran, and late Friday here on the East Coast of the United States, was that really for the first time in 70 years, Israel carried out a very high-profile military attack from the air and failed. All the spin, all the stories planted in the New York Times and Jerusalem Post and Haaretz about, "Oh, we did great, man. We took out all these." The rest of everybody else in the region knows what happened. They go, Iran stopped Israel. They stopped them. Because the initial reports out of Israel, they're going to sustain that for like 12 hours. And, they called it off after 3. Why? They recognized they were wasting missiles. Now, if their goal was to see if they could attrit Iran's air defense system by forcing them to fire lots of missiles, that could have been a military objective, but that clearly it wasn't. They intended to destroy the air defense systems and a lot of the ground radars, and Israel failed to do so.
Yeah. Larry, if you consider those Arab states together with Turkey after these interactions between Iran and Israel, in your opinion, is the picture of Israel changing in their mind?
You mean among the Israeli population, the Jewish population?
No, I'm talking about the Arab states.
Well, yeah, I think it's starting to change. I think this was the assessment of Iran, I think in particular, is changing because they're seeing, what happened in April, the first strike, was a demonstration that Iran had the capability to fire a variety of weapon systems at Israel. The second strike on October 1st was a clearer message to Israel that we can penetrate your air defense system, that Iron Dome is not impregnable. And now, add to that, they've shown that they could stop an Israeli attack that was intended really to cripple Iran militarily. I think you may have read what I posted on my at sonar21.com, but the comment from this ardent Zionist about, initially, boy, they were working to roll over the Iranians. The Iranians had nothing. They were backward. They're just defenseless. That's not what happened. But, part of my frustration is, can you get the people to actually acknowledge the facts about what happened? And that's very difficult.
Larry, it seems that Israeli media channel reported that only 3 Hezbollah fighters killed and wounded an entire Israeli forces of 20 soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're talking about this in the Israeli media, how could be that the situation between Israel and Hezbollah in the southern part of Lebanon? Because at the end of the day, Netanyahu needs to do something in the southern part of Lebanon with this situation. They have to come to a solution, or maybe, I don't know if they want to continue this conflict in that region.
Well, they're trying to figure out how to, again, extricate themselves. It's a repeat of 2006. 2006, they thought they could roll in there and overwhelm Hezbollah. Now, what Israel is doing is really in sort of sharp contrast to 2006, is they're making far more extensive use of aerial bombardment of cities and villages with Israeli aircraft, and including Christian villages, places that really have nothing to do with Hezbollah or not critical part of Hezbollah's military infrastructure. Israel is engaged in genocide, pure and simple. They are doing nothing but attacking hospitals, schools, humanitarian centers, all in the name of fighting terror. They're using terrorism to fight terrorism. And, those are words coming out of my mouth that I never thought I would say, but it is just a simple fact. And meanwhile, Hezbollah, I'm not the only one that predicted this. Scott Ritter's talked about it. Doug Macgregor's talked about it. I think Danny Davis has talked about it. That the Hezbollah forces have an extensive network of tunnels and defensive emplacements in southern Lebanon. And the terrain in southern Lebanon is very difficult. It's a mountainous region. And so there are limited access points, and many of those access points provide an excellent opportunity for setting up ambushes. But that's exactly what Hezbollah is doing to Israel, and it's inflicting, probably almost 10 times the number of casualties that Israel experienced going into Gaza Strip. I mean, Gaza Strip was, cities of people with no real armed presence of Hamas. Hamas was not a massive military insurgent force. Yeah, they were present, but not anything like what Hezbollah is. And Hezbollah, in contrast to the Hamas fighters, are a bunch of combat-hardened veterans. They fought in Syria. They fought against ISIS. And now they're turning around, and they're being very effective in killing and wounding Israeli soldiers in large numbers. And so you're getting almost daily reports of 2 dead, 5 dead, 4 dead. The other day it was 8 and 17 wounded, something like that. Israel's not going to be able to sustain that. They can't sustain those kinds of losses. They're not that big.
When you look at the behavior of Israel, they went into Gaza. They failed to achieve anything. And right now, instead of coming out with a solution for the situation in Gaza, or maybe negotiating, they went to southern part of Lebanon. And right now, with this attack on Iran, these interactions between Iran and Israel, it seems that the end game was to bring the United States in to help them to save the situation, because they're not capable of doing this, Larry. In Gaza, in the southern part of Lebanon, right now with Iran, can we say that the United States getting involved on the part of Israel to fight all of these people together, all of these countries together, has failed so far.
Yeah, if that was their objective, certainly it has failed. But their goal in Gaza is to try to depopulate Gaza, and they're having some success with that. Except they've not opened up a pathway where the Palestinians there in Gaza can flee, can leave, and depart someplace else. They just keep moving them around like pieces on a chessboard, and killing them, and starving them. They're literally trying to exterminate the Palestinian people, and the inhumanity of it is staggering. And the world so far has stood by idle. Some criticism, some condemnation, writing a stern letter, but there's nothing really that's going to hurt Israel for its conduct. It's remarkable that Israel can point to October 7th as justification for what it's doing. They killed 1,200 of our people. Let's accept that number as true. It was actually, I think, 1,159 is what the Israelis finally came up with. Let's ignore the reality that maybe as much as 50% of those Israeli casualties that day were inflicted by Israel itself to try to stop Hamas from taking hostages back into Gaza. So, but let's say the full 1,200, count that. And since then, Israel's killed close now, the numbers approaching 50,000. Minimum, 50,000 men, women, and children. I used to, when I brought this up before with some of these ardent Zionists, oh, you can't trust those numbers. Those are the Palestinians are making them up. Well, just the other day, Matthew Miller, State Department spokesman, was just celebrating the death of Aya Sinwar, and said, quote, and Sinwar is responsible for the 40,000 plus deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. I went, oh, he's at least now admitted the number of dead from the State Department. The State Department is even accepting that number. Now, they're blaming Sinwar for killing all the Palestinians. Yeah, I got that right. The Israelis dropped the bombs, but it's the Palestinian fault. Great. That kind of logic. It was the Jews who were responsible for the Holocaust. They killed themselves in those gas chambers. That kind of. Please. So the fact of the matter is, Israel's campaign to wipe out these Palestinians, it's having some success. Now, the question is, can they sustain it to the point that they'll finally be able to enter? Because already you got the Ben Gavirs and Smotriches claiming they're getting the bulldozers ready so they can go in and start occupying, taking over. They're like ravenous locusts.
Do you think that then Netanyahu is able to sustain the situation in Israel? Because recently there was a funeral in Israel. He was talking and people were protesting, and they were saying that they're not happy with the situation because there is thought. It seems that Israelis are understanding the pain right now.
I don't think so.
The invasion of the southern part of Lebanon, because they're losing their people.
Yeah, well, the realization starting to dawn on them. But right now, still Netanyahu has the majority support of the population. Yeah, there are some Israelis speaking out, but that is my understanding. Netanyahu was speaking at a ceremony commemorating the 1-year attack on October 7th. And it was there that he was met with some of the protesters saying, now, make peace, reach a negotiation. This idea of making peace presupposes that what's going on between the Zionists and the Palestinian people, and it doesn't matter whether the Palestinians are Muslim, Christian, atheist, doesn't matter. The Zionists believe that that land where those Palestinians are located on right now is there. It belongs to the Zionists. It doesn't belong to these Palestinian people. The ones the families that have inhabited places in the West Bank for generations, literally hundreds, going back more than 1,000 years, that they don't have a right to that land. That belongs to the Jews. Yeah, so there's nothing to negotiate here. The only negotiation is how fast are you going to pack up your shit and get out of my land. That's the Zionist mentality. So, I fully understand why the Palestinians are fighting them. And, I guess if we had magical powers, the reality would be you would go in, you would take all those 700,000 settlers out of the West Bank, force them back into the territory originally ceded to Israel in 1948, go back to the pre-1967 borders, and then put in some real UN muscle, which is a contradiction in terms, I realize, an oxymoron. But, put in Russian troops, American troops, Chinese troops, major power countries, so that neither side would dare to try to shoot them, attack them, and keep the two sides separate. But that's not going to happen. And so this thing's going to go on. Frankly, I don't see how Israel sustains itself and remains intact as a country. I don't know how long that will take, but the process, what has transpired over the last year, despite all this support from Zionists in the United States, you don't see all of them packing up and saying, man, it's time to move to Israel to stand with our people. They're not doing that. They're getting the hell out. People are leaving Israel to come back to the United States or go, even Bibi Netanyahu's son. He's hanging out in Miami. The trend line for Israel, the trajectory, is not good. And I think what we're going to see in the next week or two is Hamas is really going to intensify its attacks. Again, if I'm the Iranians, you sit there and you start weighing your options to respond to what Israel did Saturday morning in Iran with its attacks. You can say, okay, if we launch outwardly, we respond directly. This does run the risk of escalation. It does run the risk of, maybe compelling that Israel will feel compelled to use nuclear weapons. But so is that our only option? Oh, heavens no. We can boost the capabilities of Hezbollah and the Houthis. We're going to actually give them some weapon systems that they haven't had previously that they will be able to employ against the Israelis. And so using proxies to attack Israel will just further weakens Israel. And then the Israelis got to, they have to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do? What's next?
In your opinion, does Hezbollah need Iranian forces helping them in Lebanon?
Well, to define that a little bit, I mean, right now Hezbollah is quite capable of continuing sustaining the fight. But any assistance provided from Iran would be quite welcome. So they're not dependent on it, but it's certainly beneficial. So you can't minimize that as being unimportant.
Larry, when you look at Israel, you talk about people who are supporting Netanyahu right now. and how, in your opinion, in terms of the public opinion in Israel, which is so delusional, because recently, when you see a journalist talking about by the killing, by the assassination of Nasrallah and the commanders, Hezbollah was defeated, just go in southern part of Lebanon and destroy everything. When a journalist thinking this way, you look at the public opinion, ordinary people who are not that much familiar with the situation in the southern part of Lebanon. What would be the situation that can bring some sort of sanity to these people who are living in Israel, who are giving the support to Netanyahu?
Casualties. It'd be a combination of casualties and physical destruction inside Israel. So Hezbollah yesterday, on Sunday, had issued an evacuation warning